All right, 30 teams, 30 minutes. We're going to go ahead and talk about the Portland Trail Blazers today. Um, so we're going to go ahead and every team throughout the season, 30 minutes, 15 minutes from solo. My boy has been busy this past couple of weeks, so he's going to go ahead and bang out these preseason reviews, and then going later on to the season, we'll go ahead and make sure that it's two of us and we give every team their time. One of the emphasis of doing this is that a lot of teams just don't get covered in the national media as much as everyone, but a lot of these teams have fervent fan bases, and so we're going to go ahead and give you all the information on these teams, and if you enjoy it, definitely subscribe and tell a friend. So let's go ahead and get started with Portland. They ended the season on fire. They made the play-in game. Dame Lillard, definitely rose in, the league rankings. And right now, I think he has the belt as the best point guard in the league. No one has put together his resume of clutch performances. He had that back and forth with Paul George during the bubble. And, he just reminded everyone of how many times he sent people home on series-winning shots, excuse me. He's just been a big-time player. Unfortunately, he's dealt with injuries in these playoff runs. I think twice with versus the Warriors. He went into the series a little hobbled, and then with the Lakers this last time, he went to the series a little hobbled. But definitely he has the belt right now as the best point guard in the league. And someone says otherwise, and once again, I can't really say he's ground bound because he's a very explosive player when he attacks the rim. I believe he was in a dunk contest. And he wasn't one of those players that shouldn't have been there. He made, some explosive dunks. So, definitely everything starts and begins with him. This was always a team that I had concerns with making deep postseason runs because of their lack of size on the wing. They definitely addressed that this offseason, size and athleticism on the wing, because they, oscillated back and forth to having those Mo Harkless and Aminu wings who had that size, had the athleticism, could defend but couldn't shoot. And then last year they moved it to more offensive wings, going to Gary Trent and Carmelo Anthony, but that gave them problems against teams like the Lakers or teams that have these bigger wings and pick and roll mavens because they just couldn't defend. So them bringing in Rocco and bringing in Derrick Jones, who I'm actually higher on, who I don't think today is a better player, but I think can become a player who's to me a hidden gem. Getting those two players, I think is definitely a home run. So we'll definitely see what they do. Robert Covington, I think he's been a tad bit overrated, especially as a defender of wings. He seems to have more success, at least earlier in his career, defending smaller guards. He is someone who has great athleticism and is lightning quick laterally, but he's someone that he reminds me of just a young cat, like a kitten. Like they just jump, like they move very frenetically, but it doesn't really make sense at the time. They fall off the side and run into things because they don't really understand their power. And he's always been that type of player for me, in my personal opinion. And then I remember being him, playing for the Sixers in that season that they made the playoffs when they had Bellinelli and Ilyasova for the Sixers. And I remember how terrible he played in that series, and the shot selection that he took and just the way he defended. He constantly got out of position. So we'll see. That was a long time ago. He didn't really do anything for Houston this last go around, but he's a capable 3 and D wing. He's solid. So you have that, which is, a move to the middle. It's kind of combining what they had before, what they have now, the defense and the shooting, combining it to one. So I do like that. He is a good help defender, rim protector for his size. So, that has to be put into the equation. Derrick Jones Jr., I believe, explosive player, dunk contest. We know all that. But, I thought he started to make strides as an actual 3-and-D player. He made, at least from my eyes, I haven't looked this up on any of the advanced metrics, but from my eyes, he made a solid amount of corner threes when he played for Miami. Definitely explosive. Uh, you know, I think the Miami system is great, teaching players how to play, how to be professional. So he's going to come in as a professional. I think there's a lot of upside in him. I do think if he can become a 36% shooter with his athleticism and how much he hustles on defense, I think he has the opportunity of being a great boon for them and being a player that could definitely help them in a West that you have to defend a Kawhi Leonard, a Paul George, and then obviously LeBron James. So you have that. Their big man position, they have a lot of depth there. Zach Collins, his injury when he comes back and what type of player he comes back as is a mystery, but this is someone that a lot of people are very high on. They have Nurkic, and they brought back Cantor. So you put that's a good three-headed monster of big men, very different skill sets, play a couple different styles. Much is made about Cantor's lack of defense, but I think that only really matters versus teams that play a lot of pick and roll. A team like the Clippers, where it's a lot of one-on-one play and a lot of Kawhi Leonard, ISO'd, at the box. I think that type of team doesn't really hurt him as much. So I think he's very useful in almost every matchup besides, probably the Lakers matchup and the Denver matchup. So I think that was a good signing. They have a lot of other wings. I talked about those two wings as being offensive, defensive wings, but Rodney Hood, he tore his Achilles last year. It looks like he's going to be back. We'll see what type of way he comes back, of the way that Kevin Durant and John Wall have looked in the preseason. If that pertains to the way that Rodney Hood is going to play, that's another great asset. We're getting to the point now where this team might be too deep. You have him, you have Nasir Little, who's barely played at all, who was up there, who has a high pedigree as a high school player when he went to North Carolina, who's long, who has a lot of different skills, maybe, hopefully the player development in his work in the offseason. Never know if he's gotten a lot better, so that'll be interesting to see. Simons is a kid that I heard a lot about way back when as this player who was damn near an untouchable, who was the scoring maven. There was talks that, if he could ascend as a player, maybe you could put Cj Mccolum on the wing, on the trade block to get a wing because of the dearth of wings that I talked about early at the beginning of the show, because of the lack of being able to find a wing that could shoot at a decent clip as well as defend at a decent rate. But now, because they've gotten those wings, we can kind of see what Anfernee Simons can become. Simons, I think he's still fairly young. He's only 21 years old. So it'd be interesting to see if he could take a development and become that player that I heard so many people rave about. And then you have Gary Trent Jr., who competes. I mentioned him earlier as a shooter and a scorer as a guard, but it's not someone who can really defend. He still is he's just too undersized to defend a LeBron, defend Kawhi Leonard and players of that ilk. He competes. He seems like he's one of the better shooters in the league, but putting him on the court with Dame and CJ just makes the team just too small, and just makes them get exploited too often. And then you have Carmelo Anthony, who they brought back, who had a solid season as a bench scorer, as a starter, excuse me. We'll see what the way it's going to work out for him if he has to transition to the bench. He had issues with doing that, but he seemed earlier in his career when he was in OKC and other places, but he seems more apt to, take it on now, especially I think with the season that he had last season. Kind of makes it more comfortable for him to accept a lesser role, because he's shown players and people that, he's not dead. He can still score in this league. And then bringing in Harry Giles, he's always been one of my favorites. This was, again, someone with the high school pedigree, was the number one overall player in his draft, but it seems like, multiple knee surgeries have sapped him of the athleticism that allowed him to become that player. But you never know; he might bounce back. I think he's very skilled. Jason Tatum said that he was the best player that he ever played against. He was the only player that he ever thought was better than him. He drew Chris Webber comparisons coming in to college. But unfortunately, he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. But maybe in Portland, he could find a second wind physically, and at least become similar to the player that a lot of people thought he was. I thought he's very skilled, regardless of that. Dude, good player, good passer, still stays active on the boards. So, I think he's a good flyer player to take some time to develop. I'm kind of surprised. Once again, Sacramento just let a lot of talent go out of the building this offseason, and I'm just surprised. A small market team, I don't think that they could afford to do something like that. But, it is what it is. They say they want to preserve their future cap or whatnot. But, I just don't really, to me, it just doesn't really make sense. So, most impactful player for them this year. Dame, obviously, if he played the way that he played going before the closure of the NBA season, where he really started to heat up, and then in the bubble, if he plays that way, then he's in discussion as a top 6-7 player. And, with how deep this team is, then, they're in discussion for a top seed. Portland's always been a tough place to play, and I do think we're going to get fans back sooner than later with the vaccines rolling out. So we'll see what happens in regards to how far they go in the postseason. But I think a lot of it is, is he that supernova? Has he taken a leap? And as I said, clearly has the point guard build. If, he has taken this leap to supernova, to the best point guard in the league, maybe best offensive player in the league, or one of the best with his range, it really, affects the way the defense has to play him, and subsequently the shots that other players can get. I would say that matters. And I would have to put Nurkic in the table as well. He provides them that, that bully ball option in the pivot. And then, does he expand his range more to where he can shoot threes and he becomes this, all around offensive force who's, picked up his defense. So I would say those two. Definitely the most intriguing player would be Zach Collins. I mentioned his injury. I mentioned the high hopes that a lot of people have for him as a player. Is he someone that continues to improve? Is he someone that, expands his jumper? He's always been a good defender, rim protector. Does he take a leap in that category? Does he become, a semi, fringe all-star player, which a lot of people have him projected. I don't have him projected that high, but I could see how someone could come to that conclusion. And then also Derrick Jones, that wing combo that I mentioned of Covington and Derrick Jones allows them, if they're both making their shots, to be now start ticking up towards a league average defensive team. And with their offense, that's a recipe for home court advantage in the Western Conference, and possibly get into the Western Conference Finals. I think this team is talented enough. Dame is talented enough. CJ is talented enough. I haven't talked too much about him. That's about trades, but he is one of the premier one-on-one players, bucket getters in our league as well. So as far as regular season, postseason, I definitely think that they have a chance. I don't think that they can beat the Lakers, but there's definitely moves there that they can make. I talked about maybe potentially moving CJ, potentially moving Zach Collins, because he's someone that is held high in NBA ranks and esteem. So it's interesting to see what Portland does. I do think. Dame is how old now? Dame is 30. So it's winning time. He's a smaller guard. So who knows? He seems like someone who takes care of himself and works on his craft every year. But who knows? And CJ's 29. So this is money time. They are the prime of their careers. This is money time. So if a trade presents itself, I think they have to jump on it. They were always a team that was rumored for like Kevin Love, but now I just think that they have a just an influx of big man at that position. That doesn't really make sense for them. So I don't know who the exact trade target is. You don't know who's available on the draft, on the block right now, excuse me. They've been mentioned and passing for James Harden. I don't think that really makes sense fit-wise, but, I mean, he's such a talent that you just bring in the talent depending on what you have to pay for it. So, Portland's a definitely interesting team. They could definitely be in discussion as, even, possibly the second best team in the West. So we'll definitely see what happens with them. So that is 15 minutes on the Portland Trail Blazers. If you disagree with anything I said or have any comments, definitely leave them, and I'll respond to all of them. 30 teams, 30 minutes. Get at me.